Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I am bringing to you today this episode. It's not the one I wanted to record. It's not the one I even planned or intended to record. I was ready and preparing to share an episode about compassion and what is needed in order for us to provide a really rich and an authentic sense of compassion. And I realized about halfway through preparing it that I couldn't talk about compassion until I talked about pain and suffering. So it's a bummer. If this is not the day for you to listen to this episode, feel free to skip it and come back when you need it. But that really is the nature of pain and suffering. We never want to look at it. We don't want to acknowledge it. And because of that, it is one of the core emotional, spiritual principles that I come back to over and over again. Pain is coming for you. If you have a body, if you were born into one of these fragile human forms, you're gonna experience pain. That is a guarantee. You, in the course of your life, hopefully not often and hopefully not early, but in the course of your life, you will experience physical pain. You will have injuries. You will be sick. As we get older, our body begins to fail. And there are all sorts of ways that having this body is a sentence. You will have pain. Physical pain is unavoidable. If you were born into one of these fragile human bodies with fragile human hearts, you will experience emotional pain. You will be disappointed. You'll be heartbroken. You will experience the highs and lows of being an emotional being. You hopefully have fallen in love and you've experienced the tiny moments inside of being in love that are painful. And then when we lose that love, the devastation that's left behind. You may never, I hope that you never experience the betrayal that happens when someone that you love betrays you. But I think even if you don't, I think all of us as humans experience a disappointment so profound that it feels like betrayal when something that they expected or anticipated from someone or something they really cared about was ripped away. When there's that sense of shock, right? That betrayal happens. If you are born into one of these fragile human bodies with fragile human hearts, you will experience emotional pain. And also, not just if you were born into this human body, but I actually think because you were born into a body that is somehow able to contain or at least create an anchor for our spiritual self, we experience spiritual pain. And you may not identify it as spiritual pain, but this is what I think spiritual pain looks like. It is a feeling of not belonging, a sense of being misunderstood, or as if you have to hide yourself in order to be welcome or to be approved or accepted or to receive love or affection. It is a feeling of separation or distance. And that separation or distance might be from yourself, or it might be from community, it might be from family. Spiritual pain often takes the shape of a feeling of separation or distance, a feeling like you can't quite put your finger on who you are or what you're supposed to be doing. And the reason why I said that it is a requirement, actually, a result of being in this body, is that our identification with our body, right? Like my face and my body and my name and all of those things makes me think that I am Vera, I'm me, and you're you. And that there is then, it creates this sense of separation. And the longing that so many mystics and spiritual writers and poets and musicians and teachers have talked about over lifetimes, over millennia, is this. It is that separation from the divine source, that seeking to fill that, what we might call God-sized hole inside of us. That separation, that distance is spiritual pain. Okay, so now we've talked about pain. That's delightful. Super cheery for your Wednesday afternoon. And they are just true. You won't always be in pain. That's the good news. In fact, once you can navigate and reckon with and accept the fact that you will experience pain, often you get to experience the good stuff of life more brightly. Not in spite of. It's like a weird correlative relationship, right? Like our capacity for sensation expands, and it doesn't just expand in the shitty direction, it also expands in the pleasant direction. So our ability to feel a sense of joy and wonder and awe and delight and humor and, all the good stuff. That's just part of the assignment. It comes as a birthright. You cannot avoid pain. You can try, and in fact, you will try. We all will try. We all have so many ways of avoiding the real discomfort, the like prickly poison of pain. And unfortunately, often the most effective way to reckon with pain is simply to acknowledge it, to accept that that's what's happening, to recognize, to welcome, even when we get there. Sometimes that requires a tremendous amount of skill to just allow that exquisite sharpness to exist. And that gets me to the other part of this episode, which is the one that is pretty profound. And for a long time, I used to think that pain was mandatory and suffering was optional. And I don't believe that anymore. So what is true about suffering? Suffering is the denial of our pain. It is the judgment of our pain. It is the abandonment of our pain, the pushing away, the like putting it onto somebody else. So blame is a form of this. Blame is a way that we suffer, because then I'm just telling a whole story about all of the reasons that it's your fault, right? I have this tremendous heartbreak. I make a long list in my head of all of the things that my beloved did wrong and why they screwed up and what they should do better and right? This is sort of like the narrative of resentment. And that resentment is actually a cycle of suffering, because having all of those stories, having all of that blame, having all of that resentment pointed at the person or the place or whatever, the thing that I think is the cause of my pain, protects me, at least initially, from having to reckon with the fact that there is pain. I don't want to feel it. Don't let me feel it. I'll do anything other than to experience how exquisitely terrible this is. And so I'll find a target. I'll find a scapegoat. I'll find the bad guy. And sometimes that bad guy is ourselves, right? Like if our body is in pain, especially if we have a chronic debilitating pain, it often that our body becomes the enemy, and we keep throwing more and more toxic thought or painful judgment thought onto our body that's already suffering, already experiencing pain, adding to the pain, becoming suffering. Suffering is the rejection of our pain. And every time we push our pain away, it adds to the cycle. It adds to the suffering. That is the place that we have a choice, right? We have a choice whether we can acknowledge, accept. I was reminded recently of a really extraordinary technique that I learned initially from Tara Brach that has the abbreviation RAIN, RAIN. So we recognize the pain that is happening. The second step, the hardest one, is that we accept that pain is happening. And only once we have accepted it, we start to get curious. We investigate, we inquire, we start to wander around it and wonder, like, where is it? Is it moving? Does it stay the same? What is the sensation that pain is creating, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual? What is the nature of it? There's a long and deep process around that. And then the end, the final portion is the end, the nurturing or the nourishing, that the pain is pointing us in the direction of something that either we need or that will ease the pain that we're experiencing, right? That the pain has a way of expressing a kind of hunger. So when we experience, for example, the spiritual pain of separation, that's very real. When we have that existential, what am I even doing here? I have no purpose. The world is just a chaotic series of choices and it's completely random. And then one way we die and like none of it matters. That is spiritual pain. When we're having that kind of existential crisis, that is a kind of hunger, right? Just like hunger pains, it is a kind of hunger to find something bigger, something deeper, to find something that we could actually put our faith in, that we could actually find meaningful, worthwhile. So those are the ways to navigate pain, that RAIN. But when we aren't able to recognize or accept or inquire about pain or nourish it, we judge it, we reject it, we abandon it. We put it somewhere else. We find a way to blame. We find some reason why it's happening. We start to internalize then feelings of like guilt or shame, right? That like, I'm having this feeling again. What's wrong with me? When will I ever stop dating these assholes, right? That suffering that's the delta, right? That's the place that we have a choice. And maybe you have an experience of this and you understand both how powerful it can be to just reckon with our, heart-wrenching sorrow without trying to fix it or push it away. Or maybe you also, like me, have like done everything possible to avoid it. Like you like over exercise, right? You like woke up and like went for a run first thing every morning for a really long time. Or you drank too much, or you ate, or you went out and had lots of crazy sex. And any of those things, maybe you worked compulsively, right? Maybe you are a cleaner. I'm really jealous of the people who clean instead of feeling pain. I really wish I could channel that thing that's like finding a way to like take all of this hardness and like put it into something productive. That is not my strategy. So when we can release those and like those coping strategies, those like ineffective strategies that we've done to avoid, detract, deflect, like numb, often those strategies then create more pain in their wake, right? I hate that this is true, but it is, right? So like overworking is one that I like to think about and talk about often, actually, because it's actually the one that is encouraged in our culture. Working 60 hours, we have this competitive, I didn't sleep that much, or like how tortured we are, or all of this stuff that like inside of a capitalist society, the more you can work and produce, the more value you have. And so if that becomes the way that you avoid all of your feelings, if that becomes the place that you pour your meaning seeking and your spiritual pain, very tempting. It's very tempting, my friends. I learned this, that I could be a workaholic even as a yoga teacher. So that's That's how I got here. These coping mechanisms that we develop to avoid feeling the pain often add up to other things. So people who have this tremendous workaholism, right? Suddenly you're working 14, 16-hour days, 6, 7 days a week for years. There is a toll that takes, not just on your body through cortisol and all of that stuff, but also on your relationships, on your sense of self, so forth. So the suffering is what comes when we are unable to face and accept our pain. And all I'm doing for you here is basically just like recapitulating the basic foundational principles of Buddhism. So I'm just going to acknowledge that that's the case, that like the core and initial truth of Buddhism is sarvam dukkam. Sarvam means like form, right? Or like a place. It's like when something comes into existence. It's a thing, it's a body, right? Sarvam is like manifested reality. Dukkam is like hard, painful, heavy, sticky, like dark. So that there are lots of ways that this gets translated. The most common one that you maybe have heard is life is suffering. And I don't love that because I think it creates a false equivocation. Because the direct translation from the Sanskrit is sarvam is like form, dukkam like is hard. So being in a body is hard. Things are painful. Like that feels like a better, accurate description. Like when we get this body, with the body comes dukkam, hard stuff. Stuff is hard. Life is hard. That I would take as a translation of sarvam dukkam. My favorite Krishnadas often loosely translates this as like stuff sucks, right? It sucks sometimes. So these are foundational practices inside of that Buddhist approach. And Tara Brach is a modern American Buddhist teacher. And so finding a way to navigate pain and suffering is an invitation of a spiritual life and a spiritual practice. And so I don't come by it lightly, and I'm not like, I don't think it's exclusive to Buddhism. I think in its own interesting way that this is about like the nature of sin in Christianity. Look, again, I'm not Christian, just like full disclosure, but that sin thing is like we do bad things or bad things happen and we respond poorly to them. So much of religious teachings, regardless of the religion, are as a way to try to explain or answer the question, like, why does bad stuff happen to good people? It doesn't make any sense. Why does this person have a leg up while all these other people are suffering or like struggling, like they don't have what they need? The pat answer is, well, life is hard. This shit sucks. That's just the case. And I do not mean it. And I think it's easy to fall into a pattern where it is a dismissive. Well, that's just life. Life is hard. Just deal with it. And that just deal with it is actually an invitation to the next phase, which is to suffer, right? It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Expect it to be hard. Don't get your hopes up, right? Those are all protective mechanisms against pain that we have experienced. And they're reasonable, protective mechanisms. And I have no judgment against people who put up that protective mechanism. And when we can really sit with the full presence of pain, when we can hold the reality of the suffering that we have experienced and potentially are experiencing, there is a tremendous opening that happens as a result of that. And I think that part of the reason that my, spirit team was pointing me in the direction of this episode today. I somehow yesterday went down a rabbit hole reading about Buchenau and the very reality of what happened during the Holocaust and World War II. And reading and listening to the descriptions of Dwight Eisenhower, who was then, he wasn't president yet, he was the general, that he insisted on going to see it in person. And there are many actual spiritual teachers who continue to go and witness, simply to bear witness to the unfathomable pain and suffering that happened in those places. And as I was reading and remembering, obviously have studied and learned so much about this in my life, as I was reading and studying that, I could feel the heaviness and like the weight of it in my body, and like tears came to my eyes. And then earlier today, I found myself steeped in this story about the orphanages in Romania. And I won't go into all of those details. Maybe I'll post a link in the show notes if you want to read more about it. Like, make good choices, friends. For children to be abandoned and to not get the kind of true love and care that we need in order for our brains to develop, in order for not just our intellectual brains, but our emotional brains, our ability to relate to others, to be in society, to have meaningful, rich relationships. So much of that is developed in childhood, like when we have a loving, connected caregiver. And so tens of thousands of children were deprived of this in Soviet Romania. I suddenly was like, why do I keep reading about all of this hard, heavy shit? And I remembered that, oh, right, I'm recording this episode about pain and suffering today. And so maybe someone somewhere is putting all of this in my pathway so that I can really reconnect to like what that feels like. I have experienced my fair share of both pain and suffering. I have chronic injuries. I'm hypermobile. And for all sorts of reasons, I have chronic challenges. I'm in a low level of pain all day, every day. And it varies. Sometimes it's better than others. When I do the things that help, I have less pain. When I have less pain, I stop doing the things that help, and then suddenly I have more pain, which is like this is the perfect little teaching, right? Is that like the pain in the body is an invitation for care. And when I take care of my body in that way, the pain is less. When I don't take care of my body in that way, the pain is more. And once I could release myself from the judgment of that, I stopped adding on layer upon layer upon layer of that pain. So I used to believe that pain was inevitable and suffering is optional. And I no longer believe that. And this is why. Because suffering has a unique ability to forge connections between us. That I feel the most connected to my humanity, to the wide expanse of my humanity, of my softness, my compassion, my outrage, my interconnectedness with all beings, when I am witnessing the suffering of others. And so for that reason, I think that suffering is actually one of the most exquisite calls to our spiritual practice and to our connection with each other. Because in the end, the whole point of this is not so that we can be these soul independent humans who, get up and are productive and do all of our stuff and then get home and, we have a perfectly kept house and a perfectly kept yard. And, we meditate for exactly 20 minutes a day and we work out for 45 minutes and we just get like A pluses on being alive. The point of these practices is for us to be in deeper and more full connection with ourselves and with each other. And the fastest route to that kind of deep, rich, intimate connection is through our own suffering and through witnessing the suffering of others. I believe that a natural reaction to suffering is a sense of compassion. There are lots of other natural reactions to suffering, which include lots of the characteristics of grief, often a sense of holy rage. All of those things make us more alive. They make us more human, and they add richness and fullness to our life, whether I like it or not. I do not wish pain on anyone. I wish that suffering could be lessened. And in fact, going back to Buddhism, the core, one of many meditations, Buddhist meditations, but one of my favorite Buddhist meditations is called Tonglen, and it's very simple, that we inhale all of the suffering in the world and we exhale compassion. So the very nature of this spiritual practice, Tonglen, is to acknowledge and accept that there is suffering in the world. That's like the first half of it. It's the essential half. And then the second half, which we'll talk about soon, is about compassion, that we offer that sense of radical compassion, of acceptance, of tenderness, of care. And we cannot have that without suffering. It's impossible. And I would love to think that we would show up and be just like holy, sweet beings who like took care of each other and like were nice and like reached out and made connections with people. But I know for myself that I am more likely to reach out for someone who is having a hard time than I am to reach out for somebody who's just doing okay. And maybe you're a better person than I am. So what I would suggest, and this is just pure principle. This is just a thing that I believe is true. I think it's like a required foundational principle of any and all spiritual life, that there will be pain. And first of all, when you experience pain, which I'm sorry that you will, but you will, when you experience pain, I hope that you can sit with it in awareness, directing all of the practices that we've worked with so far at your pain, to be present and to listen and to be still and to not have to fix it, but just to witness and be there with it. That we minimize the further suffering that we experience by pushing away that pain or by finding some other strategy, right, that will distract us or numb or minimizes that pain, that in fact just causes a whole slew of other consequences that are equally, if not more painful. I hope that you are able to witness yourself even when you do deflect into blame and resentment and frustration and anything to avoid how much this sucks when it sucks, which it will not always. And I also hope that when you see suffering in others, that you will recognize in yourself the way that pain and suffering in others calls you to be more fully yourself, to be more fully human, and to be more connected. I know that pain and suffering is hard to talk about and to think about. And if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for you being on this path. I am in awe of your practice. I'm in awe of your capacity to show up for yourself and for others. And I am so glad that you share your curious heart with me in these episodes. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.